Okay, let's talk about the quarterbacks that'll be at the top of the draft. And like I said, it appears there are at least 5 that are going to go in the first round. But the NFL, as I just reported, there could be as many as 16 quarterbacks who get taken, at least come to an NFL camp. There's no doubt that Bryce Young is great. Those who doubt Bryce Young are looking at 2 different things. The size, 5'10", says he weighs 190, bulked up to 200 for the combine in Indy, but is now down below that. I'm not going to say he's fragile because he's never had a major injury, but in the NFL as a quarterback, John, you are going to get hit. Ooh. And if you're 5'10", 190, and these freight train linebackers are coming to get you, you're going to get busted up. You know, he's succeeded Tua Tagovailoa, who got dinged up at Alabama, fractured hip and all that, and has now had concussion problems. And he's bigger than Tua, but he's slight of frame. Doesn't mean you can't put him in an NFL camp and a full year of weight training and nutrition and bulk him to 200 and make him stronger. But number 1 pick in the draft is going to play, so he's going to get exposed. So that there's a fragility question, I think, there. C.J. Stroud, I think, did a lot of great things in 2 years at Ohio State. Finished up, I think, this year with 41 touchdowns and maybe 5 interceptions, though he tailed at the end of the year when he lost his run game. There's a rumbling out there that he did not do well on the cognitive tests that the NFL provides each club to give players. And that means sight recognition, processing information, playbooks, audibles, things like that. I find that hard to believe. Ryan Day, the Ohio State coach, just answered back early Monday morning and said, there's nothing wrong with this kid. This kid knows football. He's a student of the game. Let him grow. So I'm not quite sure what's fact or fiction, but C.J. Stroud will be number 2. He's a bigger version of Young. The wild card in the whole thing is the kid that the University of Florida they call AR-15, Anthony Richardson.
Great name.
Yeah, great name. Wrong time of society to have that.
Right.
But he is a freak of an athlete. He is one of the really dynamic athletes, run and throw. A lot of people equate him with Cam Newton when Cam was at Auburn, and Cam was just prolific. The only concern is he's only done it for 1 year, and he only completed 53% of his passes. Now, he's got a cannon for an arm. He's a phenomenal athlete, run and throw, pocket presence, intellect. But if you're great, why would you complete only 53% when everybody else who's great in the country is completing 65%? So there's some issues there about AR-15 and whether or not he's ready or whether or not it might be a project. But like I say, he's a freak of an athlete. The 4th one is a kid out of Kentucky, and he's starting to get more play because his private workouts have gone really well. I'm talking about Will Levis. He was a transfer. He sat 1 year, started last year, put phenomenal numbers up. What they like about him is what Bryce Young does not have, bulk. He's 6'3", 6'4", big frame, 215, 220, strong arm, can move the pocket. Now, he's not going to run very much, but the guy is dynamic, and he's a real leader. He has really climbed the board. At one point, everybody thought, well, maybe he'll be the 15th pick in the first round. They're thinking now he might go inside the top 7. So he has really elevated himself through his workouts. Hendon Hooker, Tennessee, dynamic athlete, bad knee injury at the end of the season. It was kind of a one-man show, put up some really gaudy run and pass yardage stats the first half of the season before he got hurt. His name is out there as being somewhere between 7 and 15 in the first round. I think if you're drafting Hooker, you're drafting him to rehab him and then maybe look at the back end of next season before he actually gets on the field. He won't be a starter right at the get-go. I'll talk about a couple other really interesting names. This name has not gotten very much push at all. He had a great career at Fresno State as a transfer, bounced back from the University of Washington, Jake Haener. And he really lit it up in the Mountain West Conference. But he's only 6 foot. Now, he's a tough 6-footer. He sticks his nose in there. He's not afraid to stay in the pocket. He can move the pocket. He can throw on the run. And this past weekend, NFL people just started dropping hints there's a little bit of Drew Brees in this guy.
Mm.
And when I hear that, that means intellect, toughness, strength of arm, and the fact that he's pretty mobile. So Jake Haener might be the kind of guy that you would have thought, well, somebody will pick him in the 4th or 5th round. He might be like a Brock Purdy that look at all the intangibles this guy does. And look what he did for Fresno playing in some big time games against big time teams. So keep an eye on him. That's really fascinating. And the one I don't understand, there is no push at all for Max Duggan from SMU.
Really?
But I think the reality is there's a size factor there. We're not talking about big time quickness, not like Bryce Young or AR-15. And, is he a systems quarterback that excelled at TCU? And so he'll get drafted, but it's going to be way down the board, which is kind of odd for somebody who's a winner and somebody who did such a phenomenal job. So those are the hot names. But like I said, there could be as many as 16 quarterbacks taken Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting names there. I remember watching some of the San Diego State, Fresno State games. And yeah, Haener, I really didn't think about him in the draft. But yeah, he's legit. He could be an up-and-comer. But you're talking about Bryce Young and that 5'10", 190. But he was playing in the SEC. I mean, and granted, it's college, but those are some big boys in that league there.
Yeah, but he was also playing behind a massive offensive line that gets all their guys drafted with great running backs and great wide receivers. In the NFL, if you're at the top of the draft board, John, you're going to play for a bad team. You're going to get your brains beat out. And if you're 5'10", 194, you're going to take some wicked hits. And I don't care if you can scramble and move the pocket, you're still going to get exposed and you're going to get hit. But he's so good. And like I say, you draft him, Carolina will have to play him because they have nobody else. You're just going to have to protect them. But, you give them a year in a weight training program with the NFL. They're fanatical about being fanatical. And you put them in a nutrition program. They will bulk him as long as they can get him to the second year without getting him busted up. That becomes a big issue.
Well, who's your favorite all-time small quarterback? Is it Doug Flutie?
Nah, Doug was a one-trick pony. Nothing negative about Doug. He was just a great little quarterback, but he was little. And after a while, I remember when I was the voice of the Seahawks, I asked Mike Holmgren about him. And Mike told me, hey, you compile video on guys, you figure guys out. And when you compile video on Flutie, you figured out what he couldn't handle. And you would devise blitz packages to force him into things that he can't handle. And eventually it all caught up to him. And yeah, he'd have a really flashy game, but good guy. He squeezed every ounce of football out of his life that he could. And a great guy. So there have been a few. I mean, Russell Wilson, when he came out of, where was it? Wisconsin. He had started at North Carolina State, went to Wisconsin for 1 year. The rap on him was too small. He's 5'10". Now, he can fly.
Oh, yeah.
He can motor. And he's got the guts of a burglar because he'll stand in there and make plays. And he got physically bigger and bigger. And he really only had, I think, one major injury in the NFL. And what you do is, as you go through with this quarterback, you'll start to devise your offense to better fit his strengths, to protect him, to keep him in certain situations where he can excel. Whether that's move the pocket or, there's just a lot of things they did with Russell Wilson during the really good years in Seattle that helped him. So of the undersized quarterbacks, he's probably the most quality in modern day NFL football.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of guys. I mean, Drew Brees wasn't that big of a guy either. But I remember the rap always was, can they see over the top of their offensive linemen? So I'm curious to see how Bryce Young does. And maybe if he goes number one, it could change the fortunes of the Panthers.
Yeah, I think the draft is going to be fascinating because of Carolina at 1, but obviously, as we've talked about, what Houston does at number 2. Okay, next topic.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit now about the draft.